Now we're going to look at the supply side. Again, just like with demand, we have some important vocabulary that you need to understand. So quantity supplied is defined as the amount of a good that its sellers are willing and able to sell. The law of supply says that other things equal, when the price of a good goes up, the quantity supplied of the good rises. And when the price falls, the quantity supplied falls. So consider a supply schedule for Starbucks lattes. So notice that Starbucks supply schedule obeys the law of supply. As the price of lattes goes up, Starbucks is willing to supply more of the latte. They're able to get a higher price, so they want to sell more of those. So we're going to graph this here and notice that the supply curve for lattes goes up. So it's upward sloping as opposed to demand was downward sloping. So you're always going to graph supply like this, upward sloping from the origin. Market supply is defined as the sum of the supplies of all sellers of a good or service. The market supply curve is the sum of individual supply curves horizontally. So to find the total quantity supplied at any price, we add up all the individual quantities. So here we have two different suppliers of lattes, Starbucks and Peet's. Again, we're making simplifying, but that's fine. So the market supply is here in this graph on the far right. And we're going to graph the market supply. And again, remember, it's upward sloping and looks like this in red. Okay, just like demand, there are things that can shift the supply curve. Other things, again, that are going to shift the supply curve, just like with demand, have nothing to do with price. So changes in input prices. Supply is negatively related to prices of inputs. So input prices would be things like wages or the price of raw materials that a business would need to produce their product. A fall in input prices makes production more profitable at each output price. So firms will supply a larger quantity at each price. And the S curve would shift to the right. So here's a case where the input is milk, and if the price of milk falls for lattes, then the supply of lattes is going to increase. And we show that by the entire curve here, this supply curve shifting to the right. Technology. Technology determines how much inputs are required to produce a unit of output. A cost-saving technological improvement has the exact same effect as a fall in input prices. So that means that S would increase and shift to the right. Number of sellers. If there's more producers, that represents an increase in the number of sellers. So that would increase the quantity supplied at each price as well, and the supply curve would shift to the right. Expectations about the future. If events in the Middle East lead to expectations of higher oil prices, owners of Texas oil fields would reduce their supply now and save some of that inventory to sell later so that they could do that at a higher price. In this case, the supply curve would shift to the left. Sellers may adjust their supply when their expectations of future prices change. So this assumes, of course, that the good that they're selling is not perishable. So here's a summary chart, just like we did for demand, of all of the things that can cause the supply curve to shift. Let's consider this active learning too. I want you to draw a supply curve for tax return preparation software. So what happens to this software in each of the following scenarios? What happens if the retailers cut the price of the software? What happens if there's a technological advance that allows the software to be produced at a lower cost? And what happens if professional tax return preparers raise the price of the services that they provide? So I want you to, in each of these three situations, graph what would happen to the supply curve, and we will discuss this in class.